Drakensang The Dark Eye is possibly the best RPG you've never played. Hell, you most likely have never even heard of it if you live in North America. At first sight, it's a decent looking third-person party-based offering for the PC from 2008. However, what differentiates it from other similar titles of the time is its supremely crunchy mechanics, which truly offer something different than your more run-of-the-mill D&D influenced or even D&D licensed games. This system also makes most combat encounters, if not straight up challenging, then at the very least very costly. Character creation offers you a lot of gameplay options, and the character models, particularly the lady ones, are especially male-gazy and fan-servicey. Look, it was 2008, I'll cut it some slack because this is a super small part of the game's aesthetic, and when it comes to your party characters, only a few armor sets are female specific. Otherwise, what a piece of armor looks like on a male character will look similar on a female one. The story kicks off with a murder mystery, and that's not an often used theme when it comes to sword and sorcery type things, at the very least. But it is unfortunately fairly linear. This isn't the type of RPG where you have a lot of agency in terms of where the story is going. It's the video game equivalent of soft railroading a tabletop group. Not necessarily a bad thing depending on your context. And in such a context, what matters most is how compelling the story is and the amount of agency and freedom you have in progressing your characters. There are a total of 20 character classes for your 3 potential races to choose from. Unfortunately, some classes are race specific, with humans having by far the most classes available to them. However, this system isn't as limiting as you'd think at first sight. Choosing a class is more of a guideline than something that locks you into a set style of play. For instance, all classes can use any sort of weapons they may wish to, the only difference being that each class will start with some points already invested in some of those talents. If you wish to be a spellcaster, you will have to start with a spellcasting class, but in case you're like me and want a spellcaster who can also physically fight, the game offers a really solid battle mage class. Okay, so now we're gonna take some time and talk about your stat and skill system and have a detailed look at the Drakensang character sheet, because I feel this is where the game has the most potential to lose a lot of people. At first sight, it looks like, and honestly is, information overload. There are several categories of attributes and talents, and then you notice there are several tabs as well, and magic and alchemy have separate ones. It can be quite a bit to take in, so allow me to quickly explain how things work. In case the nuts and bolts don't interest you very much, feel free to jump to the next timestamp where I talk about the story. So we'll start with the upper left, where you'll find your current character level, experience points, and adventure points. I'm pretty sure you understand what the first two are, but what about the adventure points? Leveling in Drakensang isn't as clear cut as gaining a level and then having access to new skills and abilities. Instead, the level number is more of an overall marker of where your character is in terms of development, because you have to spend your experience points to buy attribute numbers and improve your talents. But like I said earlier, the game doesn't limit your talent acquisition to your class, so you can learn new talents as you advance in the game and find trainers. That's what you use the adventure points for, learning new talents as well as spells. Which means that even if you start the game with a two-handed sword-wielding fighter, you can teach them how to use bows, axes, throwing weapons, what have you, as long as you find the proper trainer, meet the requirements, and have enough adventure points. Your base attributes are also quite different from what you'd normally expect from a D20-like system, and they are also used very differently here. Drakensang is based on the Dark Eye tabletop role-playing system, which again you might not be super familiar with, seeing as how it's a German system that has only been available in English since 2003. But its German roots definitely explain the sheer number of crunching required and fine-tuning offered to the player. The first level of fine-tuning are the general talents, the ones that are available to all characters and which deal with survival, social, and crafting skills. The second layer comes when you add to these the separate tab for combat talents and combat abilities, and then the spells list for spellcasting classes. The third and final layer of fine-tuning can be found within the combat talents themselves, where each weapon talent has a separate attack and parry number, which means the game does two different weapon talent checks depending on if your character is attacking or defending. So you can lean a character into being more likely to score hits and receive them, one who is less likely to receive and less likely to score, and you can also keep those numbers equal if you wish to. Special abilities will always check your base attribute, not a modified one, so you can't exploit yourself into buying better abilities via magical items or buffs. While the story starts off as a murder mystery, it quickly snowballs into a much larger affair, as is tradition. In this case, investigating the murder leads to the discovery of an underground dragon worshipper cult, a holy quest, clearing a marsh of undead, dwarven politics, and a fair bit of twists and turns along the way, not to mention a heavy amount of dungeon crawling. New characters and areas are introduced all the time, and this should keep you interested in the linear overall story. I say overall because there is also a considerable number of side quests that are completely optional, which you can generally solve in a few ways, but these usually boil down either to fighting or succeeding some type of persuasion role. These new areas are all self-contained mini-stories within the larger plot structure of the game. So much so that most of them are one and done areas, meaning that once you finish the main questline part of them and wish to leave, a prompt will warn you that once you leave the area, you will never be able to return, so you should finish up anything else you plan to do while inside. This is an odd choice, but an interesting one. I don't know if the reasoning for this approach was one related to computing power and memory management, or it was an earlier design decision, but what it does is it creates a sense of urgency and importance for each new area. You can't just get in, do the main questline and get out, but the longer you take and the more you explore an area, gathering and solving side quests, the more experience your party will gain, and likewise the more money and ingredients you'll gain as well. This makes the first several areas, at the very least, must complete places, if not only for the reason of leveling up your party as much as possible to give them a fighting chance with some of the end game content. Generally, the encounters in the various areas are properly balanced and quite challenging. At no point in the game will you be steamrolling through enemies regardless of your party's level, and reloading will be required. There is one exception to this, which unfortunately you will find in the first third of the game in the hub city of Furdok. The entire game takes place in Furdok and its outskirts, and this is where you'll return after finishing each of the other areas, and new side quests will pop up here constantly. But the exception I'm talking of shows up relatively early in the game, and I feel it's my duty to warn new players about it. I'm talking about the Mother Radzinski quest, which is set up as your more or less tropish by now giant rat extermination quest.
What about the ROUSs?
Rodents of unusual size? I don't think they exist.
You're made to believe that it's just gonna be a simple XP and ingredient farming quest, and while it is challenging at the point in time you get it, you still manage to get through the several dungeon levels till you reach the boss fight. This is where you find the literal mother of giant rats and have to take her down. At particular health levels she will spawn some ads which you need to take out because rats can apply a lot of wounds on your characters. There is nothing inherently wrong, bugged or glitched about the boss fight. The problem is that it's almost impossible to beat it at the level you get the quest at. And even that itself wouldn't be an issue, but the game does absolutely nothing to impart this information to the player. Just to give you an idea, your party should be around level 8 when tackling this boss fight, and even then, it might still require a few reloads and a fair bit of buffs and consumables. I think many of you who would be interested in playing the game could get disheartened by constantly failing this quest, and really, it's the only quest in the game that is simply out of whack. Just keep it in your log and get to it later. Drakensang's combat is real time with pause, and I cannot stress enough how important pausing is, because you need to issue orders constantly to keep your party alive and to maximize the amount of damage they deal. Even if the game is real time, you can tell combat is still divided into turns, or at least into fixed combat time units, because skills and spells will have varying casting times. When combat begins, your party members and enemies will first do a bit of a clusterfuck of a run around each other till everyone is fixed on the target they were going to fix on. During this time, your party is most likely to take some free damage or deal some free damage, but generally speaking, you'll be on the receiving end of that equation. Thankfully, that confusion doesn't last long, but it can sometimes be prolonged by the weird pathing and if the fight takes place in a cramped area, where the various models might not have enough space to be where you want them to be. Another reason for you having to babysit your party constantly is that they will sometimes forget they're in a fight. Sometimes, after killing an enemy or after some sort of status effect disappearing from them, a party member will just stop doing anything and let a fight happen around them. It doesn't happen very often, I don't think, but it has happened enough times to notice. One cool thing that you can do during combat, however, is that you can move items in between character inventories, and this will get you out of several sticky situations. These situations could be caused by the game's wounds system, which adds a super interesting wrinkle to the usual HP dynamics. Some attacks have a chance of placing a wound debuff on its target. This debuff affects a character's base attributes, and as such, they can be debilitating. An otherwise strong character with several wounds on them can be taken down by enemies who would otherwise not pose a threat. Once a character amasses 5 wounds, it will immediately die, regardless of how much HP they still have. I'm sure you'll agree that's a pretty hardcore mechanic to place on top of normal damage dealing, but yet another thing that sets Drakensang apart from other titles. Now, mind you, death is a relative concept in Drakensang's realm of Aventuria. You only truly die once you lose your entire party. Otherwise, if you finish the encounter with one party member still alive, the other 3 will get back up. They will be in the worst shape of their lives, basically walking dead, and will have to be seriously healed, but you'll be able to continue without having to load. Wounds are a super harsh mechanic, especially at the beginning while you're still learning how to play the game. However, once you gain some knowledge of the game, you'll be able to use wounds to your advantage by focusing on weapons and abilities that improve your chances of inflicting them. And here's a pro tip: what you can do to decrease the chances of getting wounded is to invest heavily in the willpower talent. One other thing I deeply appreciate about Drakensang is how incremental your improvement is. From your attributes and talents to your gear, generally you will only find marginally better things, and the game doesn't make upgrading easy either. You need to find trainers for your abilities, and in some cases, you need to make your own weapons in order to get something better than what is available at merchants. Now, you might think that isn't great design, but I posit the opposite. It is very good design, because it ensures that you must make tough decisions when spending your experience and adventure points. Make no mistake about it, Drakensang is a game where min-maxing is possible, but heavily frowned upon and penalized. And depending on which side of the min-max argument you find yourself on, you might find this great or truly shit.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
Magic items are fairly few and far between at the start of the game, and later they become available for purchase from various merchants, but even then, they're the same items, usually rings and pendants, and they are definitely not overpowered. The really cool magic items you will find are almost exclusively quest rewards, so if you play through the game, you will eventually get the best items possible. Again, depending on your preferences, this is either awesome or shit-tastic. Look, I think it's awesome. But on the other hand, I am a very stingy DM when it comes to magic items. However, this doesn't mean you'll always be wearing or wielding the best in slot. In between these really good quest rewards, you'll need to craft some gear because in some cases, the stuff you can craft is better than what is available from vendors. The game is equally stingy when it comes to spellcasters. You will get access to the really powerful spells in the final third of the game. And even then, the same handful of spells you've been using all game will still be as useful because you can, and should, invest experience points into your spells just as you can do in your weapon talents. And there are some super interesting spells to experiment with. The debuffs, for instance, can be extremely helpful when dealing with large enemies. There are many types of summoned creatures you can experiment with. My favorite is the skeleton summon. And the petrification spell, for instance, is extra cool because it turns enemies into proper slabs of stone, none of that statue shit. You may notice in the footage for this video a rather varied and numerous number of quick slots being not only populated but also used. The designers were aware of how many abilities and items you'll be using all the time and implemented a veritable shit ton of quick slot rows. These are particularly useful for spellcasters because you can keep and organize your spells according to your personal preferences, and for fighters who won't have a lot of abilities for most of the game, you can quick slot all the items you'll be using most of the time, just to not open the inventories for 3 or 4 characters. I very rarely placed items there though, except those I use for the entirety of the game, namely gold moon tea, hairpins or lock pins, and bandages and or healing salve. But this is one of those cases where you should do as I say, not as I do. The consumables I mentioned are things you'll need in your inventories to improve your character's chances of success when using the talents associated with them. And there are several of these talents that will benefit from either a consumable or from using a special item. Ideally, you focus each character on only a couple of these talents because there's quite a bit of them that are extremely useful and you just won't have enough experience points to spread around. To give you clear examples, the talents you will need are plant lore, animal lore, alchemy, blacksmithing, picklocks, and willpower, and these are just the bare minimum. This goes beyond the usual class trinity we tend to fall into building. These talents are more like professions and they are very intertwined. You can largely ignore them as well, but this will make the game so difficult as to render it nigh unplayable. I'm not saying you can't do it, I'm just saying you shouldn't do it. Again, you might not like this approach, I like it a lot. In dialogue, the highest relevant talents in the party are used, so that's good. And ideally you have one character for all the social talents. That's mainly what Draenor is meant for, picking locks, finding traps and talking. Obviously you can make your own character be the mouth of the party or distribute the various social talents among the other characters, but keep in mind, the social talents really benefit from base attributes that are not useful for fighting. Despite the linear nature of the game, it also features some random encounters here and there when traveling between locations. Nothing extraordinary here really, just thought it's worth mentioning. One other thing that is very much worth mentioning, especially relating to combat, is how smooth and hyper responsive the camera control and movement is. You can rotate and zoom to your heart's content, with some occasional issues popping up when you fight in a very tight area and the camera doesn't have anywhere to go. However, when walking in cities and forests, you'll see your party through this sort of hole through the textures, which looks so well done that after a while you don't really notice it, and even if you do, you can't mind it really. One thing you need, however, to keep an eye on is whenever you're trying to stealth with a single character, or generally when engaging in any type of action with a single character you've separated from the party. You can definitely select one character and go on your own. However, the moment that character starts engaging in an action, whether it's attacking or opening a chest, that will call the rest of the party to them. Now, this makes a fair bit of sense in real life. For instance, if you're hanging out with a group of friends and one of them randomly goes on their own and starts taking their pants off, it's kinda your duty as a group to jump into action and investigate what's going on and ideally prevent this pants wearing challenged friend to keep their pants on. In the game world, however, this same approach means that stealthing characters will have their cover blown the moment they try to do anything. Or if you're trying to pull some enemies with a long distance spell and only endanger your spellcaster, that's not really gonna work. There's more walking in this game than in an extended Lord of the Rings collection. And that only starts to describe the epic level tediousness of getting from one place to another in this game. You actually have 3 types of movement at your disposal. You can sneak around, because there's at least one stealth mission and a couple more you can solve through stealth. This is, as one would expect, super painfully slow, which is fair enough. Then there's the normal walking, which is just barely faster than stealthing, and then there's the running option, which has more in common with a slight jog than an actual run. Some form of faster travel should have been part of the game, even something as simple as running, and I mean actual running, not this leisurely jogging pace shit. Because the game is big, the maps are large, and each different location will have you explore more or less the entirety of the map. And it's unfortunate because the slow movement doesn't lend itself to full map exploration. And as is with most RPGs out there, you tend to find a lot of cool stuff when you explore the entire map. Generally in RPGs, exploration is rewarded. In Drakensang, exploration is time consuming and fucking tedious. It took me 65 hours to finish the game, and I think around a third of that was just getting from one point to another on the same map. I mean, honestly, the game should have ended at around the 40 or 45 hour mark, considering how much plot juice it actually has. And it's a pity, because the game doesn't look half bad, especially for the time, but even for today's standards. The world of Aventuria is very well fleshed out, and you get into a particular mood and atmosphere when playing the game. The hub city of Furdok feels very much both like a real place as well as a true-to-life Western European city of the 16th or 17th century. There are lots of small and large touches that give it realism. You can see the year of construction on the front of a manor, flies buzzing about, drunkards stumbling all around the place, as well as people going about their business or having a chat in front of doorways. Also, at a certain point in the game, you get your own home base in Furdok. This is where you can send all your potential party members to hang out till you decide to take them on adventures. You can also outfit the home with workbenches for crafting, but I do not suggest you do this because they're really expensive and you will always find crafting stations in each area of the game, including Furdok. The game's music goes a gigantic way towards cementing this particular Drakensang atmosphere. I have enjoyed this score ever since the game was released. I have used it as a backdrop to my tabletop sessions and have also been using a medley of songs as the background to many of my past videos. Several of the songs simply sound like something that you'd expect to hear from a game in this type of setting, and this was possibly the first or second time I had ever experienced that, most likely because the game was developed in Europe and the other game I'm talking about was also developed in Europe. So by this point, we're deep enough into the video that only those of you who are truly interested are still around, so allow me to address some potential confusions. Why am I pronouncing it Drakensang instead of Drakensang, since the game is in English? Well, as I mentioned at the start of the video, the game is based on a German language tabletop system, and as such its title is mainly in German, and I make it a point to try my best to pronounce things in their original language if I can even remotely pronounce it. I took a semester of German back in high school, 22 years ago, so I feel capable enough to tackle it. So because of those German origins, the title isn't Drakensang, it's Drakensang. Most likely meaning Dragon's Song, because as far as I can tell, Drakensang isn't actually German. But if you have some factual knowledge about the title's origins, please share them with me in the comments. And to clear up another potential confusion, despite it starting with the word Draken, it has nothing in common with the console series Drakengard either. Nor does it have anything in common but the name with the Drakensang Online MMO, which is much more of a Diablo-esque sort of affair. And since I have been describing the game as being challenging and very not handholdy, I feel I should offer some tips and tricks seeing as how I've already finished the game. Smash all the battles. You'll see a lot of battles strewn around Aventuria, whether it's in a small hamlet, a tomb, or Furdok itself. Smash them. Nobody cares, and most of them will contain useful stuff, ranging from money to Furdok ale to increasingly more useful items as you progress through the game. And here's a small trick related to this. Regardless with which character you open a battle inventory, if you wish to loot the contents with another character, all you have to do is simply click on that character's portrait and the items will show up in their inventory, even if the looting animation will still run on the character who opened the inventory to begin with. Loot the rats twice. There's a lot of ROUSs in Drakensang, and that's a good thing, because you can and should loot them twice. The first time will be whatever they have in their inventory, and the second time loot them with the character with the most animal lore to hopefully skin them. Skinning them will result in leather strips, which can later be used by a blacksmith to forge whetstones. And since we're talking about whetstones, weapon buffs stack. There are 3 consumables in the game that will increase the amount of damage your melee weapons can deal. For most of the game, you'll only have access to the first 2, those being whetstones and weapon balm, the third one becoming available towards the end. The thing is, these buffs stack, so you can apply a whetstone, a weapon balm, and later a diamond whetstone at the same time on weapons and get all 3 buffs. This one tip will make some endgame encounters more manageable, but still hella challenging. And now it's time for Stefan's Miscellaneous Musings. Drakensang lever puzzles. There are a total of 2 proper level puzzles in the entire game. The first one respects all of my requirements for having a level puzzle in your RPG. The second one is pretty much bullshit. I must keep it real, I am the fuck level puzzles guy after all. Fuck level puzzles. 3 of a kind. It seems the devs were really big fans of the number 3 and 3 of a kind type puzzles. There's 3 dwarves in Furdock, there's the Goblin's Transmutation game, and a cat riddle. Drakensang's references / inspiration. The game features a court case which reminded me strongly of Neverwinter Nights. This isn't as well implemented as is in either of the Neverwinter Nights games, but I just got that vibe from it. Likewise, the Dwarven City, which gets introduced in the final portion of the game, reminded me of the one in Dragon Age Origins, a game which would be released 15 months after Drakensang. Now, I'm not saying Dragon Age Origins took a leaf out of Drakensang's book, but I'm also not saying that. Drakensang the Dark Eye proved to be popular in Germany and mildly known in the rest of Europe. That's why I know of it, but it didn't really manage to break into the US market. As such, it unfortunately failed financially. Despite this, the studio, Radon Labs, somehow managed to issue a prequel called Drakensang the River of Time, a title that also has an expansion called Phileason's Secret. This title also did well in the German market, but likewise did not make it on the international stage, and as a result, Radon Labs went bankrupt. So, at the end of the day, is Drakensang the Dark Eye worth playing? Well, the answer is pretty much it depends. In case you're looking for a very number crunchy role-playing system that is quite different than any of the D20-like systems, and a lot of third-person dungeon crawling which keeps being challenging till the very end of the game where it switches things up, then you might want to check out Drakensang. If your main interest in RPGs is having agency over the story, then Drakensang is definitely not for you. The very linear and tropish nature of the game's story and characters will most likely annoy you, and there's really no reason for you to try out something you'll know you won't enjoy. Is it the best European-made RPG? Probably not. There is quite some competition from the likes of the Gothic, Divinity and Witcher series. But is it a title that should be in the top 10 at least? I obviously think so. Holy hell, that was a long video. And if you've stuck around for all this time, I tip my hat to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it supremely. In case you want to hear more of my thoughts on computer RPGs, there is a playlist right here you can check out. I've been doing this for many years now. There's lots of titles to choose from. I've been Stefan. I also have a Patreon. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in my next video.